in my, I guess, being a senior or whatever, just looking back over my 4 years, I really just gained a glimpse into God's perspective, I think, and the way that He views our life and our time, and I think that, like, from what God has taught me just this week, we can learn a lot. And there's a lot of times when we think, whether you're in college or you're being asked what's your major or what you're going to do after college, what's your job, whatever, or what do you do, or what's your title, what's your name. A lot of times that causes us to just stop and be like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? Like, what's my purpose? What's my goal here? And I think that's important for us to do. But I think why it's important is because when we're in those moments and those times, God meets us there, and He says, my purposes for you are far greater than even what you see here. My dad is a chaplain for hospice care. So patients who have 6 months or less to live get put onto his company's hospice care system, and he goes around to their houses and visits them. Some amazing stories just of the way that God redeems people at their last season of their life, the last time of their life. It's beautiful. People who are dementia and who have dementia and forget their family members' names and things like that. He starts playing his guitar and they know every word to Amazing Grace. Just beautiful things. But he talks to me a lot about how there's people who are dying, who've lived their whole life, and at the end of their life, they're like, what was it for? Like, what was it all for? And they have this amazing perspective to be able to look at the whole life as a span and see it and just what was it all for? What was it all for? People who have maybe spent their whole time on gaining money or putting money into the retirement home, but then have gotten sick and aren't able to retire, or people who, whatever. Anyway, you guys know where I'm going. And there's a guy in the Bible, actually, his name was Solomon. He was a king, actually the son of David. And God met him. He met face to face with God, and God said, "What if there's one thing you could ask for? What would it be?" And he said, "I would like wisdom." And through that wisdom, he became, according to the Bible, the wisest man that's ever lived. He also became the richest man that's ever lived, and he owned the biggest area of land of Israel. Great ruler, great wisdom. And he writes a book in the Bible. He writes a couple. He writes Proverbs, and I think Song of Songs, I don't know, and Ecclesiastes as well. And Ecclesiastes is a really sad book, but it's basically, people think that he wrote it at the end of his life. And he just goes through all these things that he's gained, or he says, what's a man's life? What is riches? What is all this? And in chapter 12, there's 12 chapters. In chapter 12, there's a verse, chapter 12, verse 8, says, meaningless, meaningless. It's all meaningless. And you read that and you're like, everything under the sun, meaningless, meaningless, everything under the sun is meaningless. You read that and at first you're like, cool. That just means I can nap for 24 hours a day. No. The cool phrase in that sentence, the one that I conveniently forgot, is under the sun. Meaningless, meaningless. Under the sun, everything is meaningless. Because he was onto something. He had everything that you could physically ask for. All the riches, all the wisdom, whatever. But he came to a conclusion that everything under the sun, everything on this earth, was meaningless. And so what does that leave? Everything over the sun. Everything over the sun. And I think in verse 12, chapter 12, verse 13 and 14, if you want to turn there or touch there, whatever you want to do. I don't know if your Bible's electronic. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry about it. It's just 2 verses. But it's at the very end of his book. After he says everything under the sun is meaningless, verse 13, he says, now all has been heard. This is Ecclesiastes 12:13. Now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. So I don't know if you guys have learned this yet. Some of you guys are younger in your college career. But if you have a philosophy class or things like that, read the first paragraph, skim the titles, and then look for the words, here's the conclusion of the matter. And you got your reading for the day. Solid.
Solid advice from a senior.
Should have told me that earlier.
Yeah. Now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of every human being. God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. Now here, all has been heard. Here's the conclusion. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the duty of all mankind. I want to talk about that phrase, fear God and keep his commandments. You're like, fear God? I thought God was love. Fear God, I thought God was this like big grandpa up, like Santa Claus, like, nah. Any ideas as to what, this is big, don't go into a big philosophical, like, theological thing. Fear God, what does it mean to somebody? Two people. Fear God, what does that phrase mean to you? Go ahead, go.
To respect him and to acknowledge his authority in your life.
Awesome. Respect him. Acknowledge his authority. Anything else?
You know how you like fear your parents, like kind of like that. It's like when you love them like so much, but at the same time you're like, oh, like if I do something wrong, like they are pissed. Like, kind of like that, like fear where you like love them, but you're also like you want to please them.
Right.
So you just try and do what you can do as best as you can do.
I see that. It's cool. I never did anything wrong, so
Oh yeah.
I never really felt that.
Perfect. Of course.
Fear God. I think anyone who ever has seen God, like in the Bible, or Moses, or times where Jesus was ascending, or when Mary saw Jesus after he rose from life, when they saw a glimpse of who God was and his glory, they fall to their knees. There's a real aspect of like fear just because of how great God is and how holy he is, how perfect he is. And in order for us to be able to live a life that is in fear of God or respect of God, we need a glimpse of who he is and all of his power and how big he is. He's huge and he's good. Fear God and keep his commandments. I think when we begin to fear God, it is this idea of awe or reverence, this realization that God is far bigger than us. And it broadens our perspective. It opens our eyes to see like more than just like what's in front of us. And we realize that God is huge. God is great. God has a purpose. God has a mission. God has his kingdom. God is being glorified 24/7 in heaven. Hey, 24/7 in heaven. 24. Yeah. I was asking around campus for a snow globe. I would actually I'd be walking through hallways and stuff and just turn to somebody like, hey, weird question, do you have a snow globe? And they were like, if you ever want to freak somebody out, ask them if they have a snow globe. in April, at the end of April. I don't know if everybody's has melted or what the problem is, but I couldn't find a snow globe. Let's see. Killing me. Don't go get it. Everybody, has anybody not seen a snow globe before?
I'm very sheltered.
Snow globe. Somebody describe a snow globe. Or describe your snow globe to us, Lizzie.
So,
what's the scene?
When I was little, it was from Disney World, and it has like a big circle, and it's like filled with water, and it's like all these little things in it.
Yeah.
They fall to the bottom.
Is it the Disney castle?
Yeah.
That's nice.
It's so cute.
That's cool. Is there fireworks every night in your snow globe?
I wish.
Do dreams come true in your snow globe?
I wish.
Cool. Snow globes. I think a lot of times our perspective of life or Earth is snow globe-ish. It's very small and limited. And when we realize that God is big, when God is greater and he's outside of this Earth, he's far greater than what we can even perceive, then we realize just how small this world is, how snow globe-ish it really is. You could go ages with that idea, but just like, you think about it, God looking down at this earth, just like a snow globe. There's maybe it's just been shaken or the thing's been turned and like there's like music going on, whatever. And he's like, okay, it's been shook. The snow's going to fall. It's going to land. Sometime it'll land wherever it wants. The things go on. It can turn it again. It can go again. It's like, but meanwhile, we're like inside the snow globe, like, and so like myopic. It's a great word, myopic. Small-sighted. And you know what gets us there to that sort of mindset or that sort of perspective of the earth or of our lives even? Is pride, I think. We think we're too big, or we think we're bigger than we really are. Can you imagine being in a snow globe? Like, you can't see out of the snow globe because it's glass and you don't realize it, but you're just like in this little world that gets shaken up every like couple minutes or whatever, you know what I mean? And like, okay, I'm done. Anyway, but you like think you're the boss. Maybe you're the governor of the Disneyland inside the snow globe. But it really doesn't mean anything because it's just a small snow globe in the realm of things. Yeah? Small thing, big scheme of things. When we realize just how big God is, we're able to see the smallness of this world in comparison to God and his everlasting nature. Okay, sorry. Pride is complete opposite of God's purpose for our lives. It's also complete opposite of who God is. Philippians 2 said that Jesus, who was God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he humbled himself and became the form of a servant and came to earth. And he died for us and cleansed us of our sins. And then he rose again, and now he's seated at the right hand of God. But God himself is humble. Crazy. God's purpose for our life, Jesus' whole message, if you read through the Gospels, was one of humility. It's beautiful. But when we become prideful or lose our perspective on who God is and our fear of God, then our worlds get shrunk and our purpose gets shortened and our lives become snow globed. See that? James 4. Actually, if you have a Bible, let's go to James 4. Let's go to James 4. James 4. So this whole chapter is on. The title is called "Submit Yourself to God." So we want to keep that in mind. And in the start, verse 6. James 4, verse 6, it says, "But he gives us more grace. That is why Scripture says, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble and to the oppressed." Verse 7 says, "Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, he will come near to you. Wash your hands and purify your hearts, you double-minded." God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. And he's talking about, James is writing about humility here. Obviously, God opposes the proud, shows favor to the humble. And then later on, down in verses 13 to the end, he goes, why do you guys boast that you're going to go here or there, or you're going to start this business here? You're very prideful in the way that you perceive life. And you say, tomorrow I'm going to go here and I'm going to make my money. Then the next day I'm going to go here and make my money. But then he says, but rather, what you should say is, if God wills it, then I'll do this. What he's saying is, you plan your lives pridefully. And you say, I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to go and put this business down. I'm going to make money. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. He said, but really you should submit yourselves to God, because God opposes the proud but shows favor to the humble. And I think what he's trying to get at is saying, when we take control of our lives in a prideful way and we lose perspective of the fear of God, then we miss the bigger point. We miss the bigger point, because God shows favor to the humble. So if we're able to humble ourselves and see God for who he really is, then we'll actually be able to achieve bigger purposes than if we were to go about it ourselves in our own prideful ways. Yeah? You get that? He goes, and then he says, in verse 14, he said, what is your life? You're but a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you should offer your lives to the Lord. You say, it's the Lord's will, we'll live and do this or that. So your lives are short anyway. So you can plan and you can try to do things, but your lives are short. They're like a mist. So, submit yourselves to God. Humble yourselves, because God opposes the proud and shows favor to the humble. The next part, that verse, Ecclesiastes 12. What do you say? The conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commandments. Keep his commandments. Jesus fulfilled the law, right? Have you guys ever heard anybody say that? Jesus fulfilled the law. Jesus fulfilled the commandments. He lived a perfect life. His death was the culmination of the law, so that we might not have to live as like slaves to the law, or try to live a life that's perfect to attain salvation, to attain being saved. But rather, Jesus came, he humbled himself, like that verse I quoted, humbled himself, came to earth, fulfilled the law, so that we don't have to live, so our lives, which have been redeemed by Jesus, are not slaves to our actions or our performance. But rather, since they're under Jesus, when we keep his commands, we achieve a purpose that's far greater than our own. So that the goal in a post-Jesus world, knowing that we've been redeemed by Jesus, knowing that Jesus has paid the full price of our sin, knowing that Jesus has covered us in his blood, and when God looks at us, he sees Jesus' righteousness. When Jesus says, keep my commandments, it's for our good. It's for our good. It's not so that we may attain somehow to salvation or get more brownie points in heaven. But it's for our good. It's because Jesus sees a bigger perspective. He sees this eternal perspective, and he says, hey, keep my commands, because what you're doing is actually taking part into God's eternal purpose rather than your own short, mist-like purpose. You see that? You guys with me? Give me a little nod. Tap the person next to you. Just say, Josh is boring tonight. I'm kidding. It's not about me. I don't want to take that. I'm kidding. What was Jesus? Thanks, bro. What was Jesus? So some guy came up to Jesus and said, Jesus, what's the two greatest commandments? And what did he say?
Love God and your neighbor.
Love God, your neighbor?
Love God and your neighbor.
Love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? Jesus said that's the two greatest commandments. Love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Then, in John 13, after Jesus at the Passover dinner, he just finished washing his disciples' feet, which is a really humble act. It's an act that a servant used to do, because feet were seen as disgraceful in that society. Jesus washes his disciples' feet, and he says, a new command I give to you. Love one another. By your love for each other, people will see that you are my disciples. Take Jesus. Jesus says the two greatest commandments are love God with all your heart and love others. Love your neighbor as yourself and love one another. By your love, people will see that you are my disciples. People will see that you have taken part in this bigger mission. Jesus came on a mission to redeem the world. He puts the Holy Spirit inside of his disciples. And he says, love one another so that people can see that you're part of my mission, that you're part of my bigger purpose. And I'll take that back to the Ecclesiastes chapter. Fear God and keep his commandments. Jesus says the two greatest commandments are fear God and are to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. Solomon says the only things that matter are to fear God and keep his commands. You know why? Because when we do that, those things are eternal. They don't have an end. See, God is from everlasting to everlasting. From beginning to the end, the Alpha and Omega. We are from 0 to 70, 85 if we're lucky. 100 if we're lucky. We can take our lives, these short lives, which seem meaningless. Things end. Things change. People lose money. People gain money. Whatever. But we can take our lives and put them inside of God's bigger purpose and help God to achieve his mission here on this earth. What a beautiful thing. And our lives can be leveraged so that they're no longer about ourselves, which in the scheme of things is meaningless, but rather they're about God's mission, which is from everlasting to everlasting. And the way that we do that, love God with all your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. That way people will be able to see that you've been tagged into Jesus' mission. And when people see that, it's attractive. It's attractive. We're all looking for purpose. We're all looking for meaning. Especially here in these couple of years of our lives. Looking for meaning and purpose. I want to encourage you guys. Take your time that you have, this small time that you have, and leverage it for God's glory. When people see that your lives are being purposeful, are being used in a purposeful way, when you have purpose, when you have hope, then they're able to see that and go, hey, what have you got? What are you doing with your life? Hi, I'm just loving God and loving people and believing that that is where my purpose comes from. And the next thing you know, the people around you start seeing that like, hey, I want to get tagged in. I want to get tagged into this bigger purpose, this lasting purpose. Think about it. Think about the things that we put our minds to, the things that we put our lives to or our efforts to. I was talking to someone today about my soccer career, if you could call it that. It's done. I'm done soccer. It's over. It's done. Things end. People get injuries. People stop, whatever. I don't want to dampen you guys' your soccer careers. They're purposeful as well. They have their purpose. But what I want to encourage you is that things can't be limited to your soccer career. Because if so, then when your soccer career ends, then so does your purpose, right? But here's the thing. When our purpose is to love God and to love others as we love ourselves, then when our soccer career ends, our purpose keeps going. When our job ends, when we move on, whatever, when we move into hospice care, whatever, our purpose still stays the same. Because it's tagged into this bigger purpose of God's that is from everlasting to everlasting. Wish I could have my diploma in my hand. I think this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
How much money you paid for school?
Yeah. How much money you pay for these classes? It doesn't matter.
For credit?
What's that?
I don't know.
You pay for credit. You pay a lot for credit. And it's like, look, in our snow globe, okay, take this with a grain of salt. I'm going to say something crazy. You can tell your teacher, you can tell your parents, whatever. In our snow globe, this test that we have next week is like a mountain, like Mount Everest inside our little snow globe. And we start climbing and we like get so focused on this top of the Everest that we want to get to. And our whole world gets shrunk into just that. And we're like, okay, cool. I got my sights set. This is my purpose for this week. I'm going to do this. It's just inside the snow globe still. It is. If we look to God and say, God, use my life for your glory. God, take my life and put it inside of your master plan that's from everlasting to everlasting. I want my life to have more purpose. Then when we have this little Mount Everest in front of us, it goes from this size down to this size because we're taking outside of the snow globe. The glass is shattering. And we're like, my life is inside of God's master plan. And I'm looking at this little Mount Everest. Cool, it's something I have to do. It's something I have to get over. It's something I have to do with all my heart. I have to do my best at it. But in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Because God's mission is to redeem people to himself. And so we walk from our house to the library and we're focused on the people around us, on loving them. We're sitting next to the people that we're studying next to and we're loving them. And our lives become tagged into God's purpose. And next thing you know, you have this great peace because you know that this little Everest has become little. And we see God's perspective on it and say, okay, God, you say that you give wisdom to those who ask. God, you give peace. God, use my life. And we get focused on other people. And we get focused on loving other people the way that we love ourselves. We get rid of pride. We humble ourselves before God. God, I need you. Next thing you know, studying becomes fun. Just kidding. Gotcha. You guys know what I'm saying? I don't want to downplay this hard work that you guys have put in, or that you guys are putting into schoolwork. But I'm saying if you could get a glimpse of who God is and His eternal purposes, and get our scope from inside the snow globe to outside the snow globe, the snow's going to fall. You're going to look at your grades in the summer, and then you're going to close your computer, and it's going to be done with. It's so true. It's so true. There's no cards. There was no cards on every chair here. I just want to wrap up here. If you don't have a pen, that's cool. Just remember it. But if you do have a pen, grab it. The reason I want to share this is not to discredit this whole work, or not to condemn people who get stressed out about work. That's not the point here.
I do too.
But what I'm saying is that God's purpose for your life is much bigger than 1 week from now. God's purpose is huge. And you have an opportunity tonight. Say, God, here's my life. Take it. I've realized these past 4 years, the only things that remain, the only things that have been meaningful are the things that are doing the work of the kingdom. And the friendships that I've made, and the way that God has been just using my life for His glory. They're the things that stand out to me. They're the things that stand out. God has purpose for your life. He does. And it may look like allowing you to do well in school so that you can do well in the future, and so that you can be put on a position of authority or position of influence. But it's not so that you can get on that position of influence. It's so that your position of influence can be leveraged for the glory of God and His purpose, which is great. You see, the reason why we're able to put our time and put our efforts under the things that we do, and to do the things that we do well, whether it looks like sports or music or schoolwork or whatever, or our service work or whatever. The reason we put our best effort in is because we believe that God can use those things for His bigger purpose, not for our purposes, not so that we can gain these things, because they end. Yeah. So I want you to take some time now. It's a couple things we talked about. Maybe, I know for me, I need to be more humble before God. I think I'm the chief commandeer of my snow globe. But I'm not. Snow globe is like just one amongst trillions, zillions. Maybe there's pride in your life that you want to confess to God and say, God, help me, give me a humble heart. Or maybe you just like to see a glimpse of who God is. You're not sure what it looks like for your life to live a life that's in fear of God. Ask God to reveal that to you. Or maybe you don't know that you've been loved by Jesus, and you feel like you just got to earn your love from Him. And your life has been bent on trying to earn His approval, or trying to do the right thing so that Jesus approves you. I want to tell you tonight that Jesus died to bring you into His family because He loves you. Jesus paid for your past mistakes. You don't have to make up for them. Jesus paid for your future mistakes. You don't have to let them determine your future. Jesus loves you. When we realize that the God of the universe, this God who we ought to live in fear of respect, of awe, this great God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, but rather he humbled himself, took the form of a human, came to earth, he died, he was buried, he was raised again. And now he's seated at the right hand of God, waiting for his enemies to be put under his feet, so that every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that he is Lord. God is a humble God. And in his humility, he died and paid for your sins, so that our lives are no longer like slaves to this feeling of trying to do. And say, Jesus, thank you for this life I've been given. Use it for your purposes. I want to obey your ways because I know that they're best for me. I know that you have a bigger plan for me. Maybe often you get consumed with your snow globe. I know I do. We get consumed with ourselves or what we have to do, or what lies ahead of us. So I'm not down talking things like grief or sorrow or suffering. Those are real. God is near in those situations. But maybe sometimes, we're myopic, we're small-minded. We get so focused on trying to leverage ourselves for our own purposes. It's like the same way you write a resume. You bend your words. You try to do everything you can to get your foot up above everybody else. That's not what Jesus was about. Jesus said, in humility, honor one another above yourself. He said, love each other the way that you love yourself. Jesus got down on his hands and knees and washed his disciples' feet. For the last should be first. God opposes the proud. He gives grace. He gives favor to the humble. Favor. How amazing is that? God gives favor to the humble. We don't need to let circumstances or things determine our lives, because our lives have been bought by Jesus for his purposes. So maybe if you just want to think about it, if you want to write it down on your card, once you write down this one thing that God is speaking to you tonight, and this next week, I want you to commit to getting up in the morning and just saying, God, this. I'm going to write in my card, God, use my life for your bigger purposes, not my own. And every morning I'm going to get up and say, God, use my life for your bigger purposes, not my own. And I'm telling you, your life is going to be, your influence is going to be multiplied. You're going to find worth. You're going to find purpose that's lasting, even beyond getting back your Scantrons, which are always marked wrong. Take some time. You can do it in your heart. You can do it on your card, whatever. And just keep it for yourself. There's a pen here. If you use your pen, you can pass it on to people. Because guys, I know, I can say with certainty that God has purposed each one of you for great things. Ephesians 2, it says that God redeemed you from darkness to light, so that you can partake in the great things that he has planned for your life. Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus for the good works that he has planned according for us. God has purpose for your life. He wants to use your life. He wants to use your life to influence people around you. He wants to use your life to show love, show his love to people around you, so that they can get a glimpse of who God is. And then their lives can be leveraged for His purposes. So we're going to close with a song. Continue to think on those things. Continue to ask God to show maybe areas of your life that He wants to invade, that He wants to use. The song says, "Take my life, take all that I am. With all that I am, I will love you. With all that I am, I will love you." Let that be your prayer tonight. That everything within you would love Jesus, would love God with all your heart, soul, and mind.